joining us tonight for another cookie jar conversation. We're going to discuss rest tonight. And like I was saying, this was a little bit harder and kind of even more confusing than I thought it would be. Lots of us need rest, but God wants us to rest in His rest. And so, hope you enjoyed this study tonight. It was kind of a difficult one for me.
It was. Well, you know, after the 2 weeks that we've just had preparing for VBS and then doing VBS,
we need some rest, don't we?
Rest.
Yeah, I do too.
In Mark 4, Jesus is teaching to the multitudes, and the crowd has grown so large that he can no longer just stay on the land. He has to get in the boat and go out to sea. And it's later that day, and later in that chapter, it says, that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. Now there were also other boats with him, and a furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. And the disciples woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." When the wind died down, it was completely calm. And he said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? And do you still have no faith?" And, you know, as I read through that, I see parallels in my own life. I, at times, have acted just like these disciples.
Don't you care that I'm in pain?
Yes, that I think I am prepared for smooth waters. You know, the Lord is in the boat, so I'm in His will, so everything should be peachy keen, right? Except when it's not. And how quickly things change and catch me by surprise. It is then that I begin to ask, "Lord, where are you? What are you doing? Aren't you concerned? And why aren't you fixing this?" And I noticed something in these verses. In Mark, we read that the Lord was resting comfortably. Not just resting comfortably asleep, but He was resting on a cushion. So he was really comfortable. Resting. He wasn't surprised by the storm. He already knew the storm was going to bring contrary winds. The disciples didn't wake Jesus, though, right away. Maybe they thought he needed rest after a full day of ministry. Maybe they thought that they could weather the storm by themselves. Or maybe they trusted in their own strengths and own abilities. It was only as the storm intensified that they began to cry out. And how many times have I done the same? Mark 4:36 says, "Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat." The storm tossed the boat, but it didn't move Jesus. He was right there. Where he'd started in the morning is where he was in the evening. So if your anxious heart or your tired mind and body need a reminder, Psalm 37:7, Mark 4:36, and Hebrews 13:8 remind us of this. Rest in the Lord. Wait patiently on Him. He is just as He was. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So what He did for the disciples, He can do for each of us.
Exactly. And on over in Hebrews, it talks about if he who rests as God rests, then has peace like God has. Back in Genesis, where God created for 6 days, He rested on that 7th day. And if we could just rest for one day, you know, from our work, our cell phones, our technology, you know, that just keeps our mind rolling all the time. The TV just keeps us going. And I have a hard time resting right now. I can't rest. And I was telling Eddie, I think I've got this rest down. I know exactly what I'm going to say. And I was explaining to him, you know, that I can't rest right now. And he said, "Wait a minute, if you're going there, you don't have rest figured out." And I said, no, I've got it figured out. If I will rest in His rest, He will give me rest in my heart. If we can rest in faith, how do we have that rest? If we have faith in Him, if we hear the Word, do what the Word says, understand it in our hearts and in our minds, hide it in our hearts, then we can live in that rest. Even though I'm in pain, I know that I'm going to be healed. I'm not worried about it. God's got this under control. You know, that's the kind of rest that we need.
Yes.
You know, if the disciples that you taught about, if they had not had faith that in him enough to call him, don't you care? Can't you fix this? You know, if they hadn't had enough faith to believe in that he could do it, they wouldn't ask him. You know, and if we don't have enough faith that God's going to fix that, I can just imagine myself in a boat, and the boat is filling up with water. But I just keep on, struggling and panicking. But if I get my mind on Jesus, if I keep my eyes on him, that's going to settle out. You know, that calm is going to come just like it did for the disciples in my storm, in my life. Like you said, we can rest with God's peace, you know. And I hope you can find some rest. You can if you get in the scriptures. Trust and obey. Another thing that I found in Hebrews also, the Israelites. You know, God watched them be disobeying and provoking him for 40 years. And he said they'll never find their rest. They're never going to find what they're looking for. I would hate for him to say that about me. Wouldn't you?
Yes.
She's never going to find what she's looking for because she's not faithful and obedient. I want to be faithful and obedient so I can find the rest that God has for me. And for you, we appreciate you for joining us. You know, here at Richmond Assembly of God, we have room for you. We have a place for you. We can use you. If you just want to join us online, our online services are streaming, but we would love to meet you in person. Thank you for joining us tonight. We love you, and so does God.